Hey there, it's Anna. I am not in the garden today. I am actually inside because we've been having some really hot weather. But I thought I would take this opportunity to answer a few questions. I put a question box on Instagram and I just picked out a few questions that I wanted to answer today and kind of let you know a little bit more about me and my garden. So I'm going to jump right into it. The first question that I got was how and when I started gardening. And so I have been gardening, I guess, in some ways my whole life. My mom had gardens. I remember going to, garden centers with her and picking up plants and seedlings. It was always a super fun activity in the spring. This is May Day. She always gets involved when I'm inside. And so, I just always, was planting plants, and I had little gardens. I remember doing like little gardening projects and things as a child. But I really started doing my own gardens, I would say probably about 5 years ago. I started off in a little balcony and I just had some pots, and it literally started from one pot of basil that I started from seed and has grown from there. And now I have my own home garden here, and I also have a community garden plot. It's been really fun. I've definitely learned a lot. I would not say I am like an expert master gardener, but I have learned a lot of things. I have learned a lot of things the hard way. I am still learning, and I like to kind of share like what I'm doing, how it's going, mistakes I'm making, the successes I'm having. And that's kind of why I started having an Instagram and then now a YouTube channel and a website and everything, just to kind of journal about my garden, I guess, and share with everyone what I'm doing. I love to talk about gardening. I love to share what's happening in my garden. And, the people in my life, although they like to talk about my garden too, there's only so much I can bother them about in the garden. So I just started these platforms so that I could chat about the garden and track my progress and share my progress and learn from other people and get advice and tips and ideas. And I find so much inspiration, I know personally, from Instagram and YouTube, just so much inspiration. And so it's fun to be kind of a part of that space as well and sharing what I'm doing. Another question that I got was why it's called the Reckless Garden. And that just really started when I was trying to think of a name, coming up for a name for my Instagram. And my gardening has always been a little reckless because I've never quite had like the perfect garden space. If you know my garden, it's a small, like my main home garden, it's like a small backyard. It's a very suburban, urban backyard. And I just always fill it like chock full of plants. I am willing to try anything. I am willing to grow anything, anywhere, light requirements, spacing requirements. I'm willing to push those limits and just basically have fun. I like to think of it as reckless garden fun, like just enjoying the garden and trying things out and not worrying too much about like getting it perfect or getting it right. For me, gardening is just for fun. I do eat the produce out of my garden. I do enjoy it so much, but mostly I just do this for fun and because it's beautiful and it makes me happy. And that's really why I garden. Another question was what zone I'm in. I am in zone 7A. I live in Virginia in the United States. My last frost date is April 15th, and then my first frost date in the fall is usually somewhere around mid to end of October. But it just kind of depends. And we tend to have pretty warm weather, like up through December, I find. Maybe we'll get a frost, maybe we'll get a cold night, but I'll have a lot of things growing, a lot of things doing really well all the way up until the new year. And then usually in February and January, February, those are the months that we get like those really cold temperatures, and that's usually when everything dies. I always get really hopeful because it'll be December and I'll have all these plants that are growing and looking beautiful, and I'm like, oh my gosh, like all my kale is gonna make it completely through the winter and not get damaged at all. And then we'll get like a random cold night or something in January or February. So that's kind of my growing situation. Virginia is also, it's very hot, it's very humid in the summer. We get a lot of rain. So that's kind of my I guess, my climate in a nutshell. But I do have here at home a very protected garden. It's fenced, it's up near the house. So it does have a slightly warmer microclimate. I find my community plot definitely gets hit harder with frosts and definitely does not have quite the protection that my home garden really does. It has a really nice little microclimate that makes it easier to keep growing things throughout the winter. And I'm actually really grateful for that because it makes it really fun. So another question was how I decide what to put in containers. And I don't really have a specific process for it. I will think about the colors. So, if I want to put like an orange and a yellow, or, maybe those are too close, so I'll put like a blue, and then I'll look for, a contrasting color like an orange or a yellow. I'll kind of try to think about that as far as like making the colors match. And then as far as what plants I plant in containers, I do try to grow a lot of container varieties. So if you've been around here, I love micro tomatoes. We've got the Tiny Tomato Club over on Instagram where everybody grows micro tomatoes and shares those. And that's super fun because those are great for containers. In my space, I grow in a lot of containers, and so I like those varieties. And there are lots of different things. I mean, there are even melons that are specifically bred for being grown in containers. And I'm kind of always interested in exploring those seed varieties or plant varieties just because I like containers so much. So that's definitely something that I think about when I'm deciding what to put in a container. Do I have a container variety of this? Is it something I'm interested in? I look for contrasting colors and colors that look good together. I love to mix vegetables with flowers, so putting a Super Bells with a tomato. And when I do that, I'm just kind of looking at like water requirements and light requirements. Part shade plants in one container, for like that tomato container example, tomatoes don't like to be overly wet, and neither do Super Bells. So they grow really happily together in a container because they kind of have those similar light and water requirements. And that's basically the biggest thing. As long as the plants have light and water requirements, basically enough space. I do probably push spacing in all my containers because I like to pack a lot of things in. That's really the process for what goes into it. And then it's just sort of like what makes me happy and what in my mind's eye I can envision it will look like. And I just sort of go from there. I have a few questions about potatoes and growing potatoes in grow bags. I am growing some potatoes in grow bags this year. It is growing super, super well. I'm really excited to harvest them soon. They're not quite ready to harvest yet, but so far they're really happy. And that is definitely something I would recommend. A few people ask, like, would I recommend doing that? Is that working? It is totally working. I have also seen a lot of people growing potatoes in grow bags. So this is definitely not my idea. I've seen it a lot of different places and a lot of people have had really good success with it. Someone asked if you have to wait until your potato has the little eyes that have sprouted before you plant it. In my understanding, you do not have to wait. No. If you've got seed potatoes that have been sitting around and they're starting to grow, eyes or legs, and they're getting, they're starting to really sprout, you can definitely still plant them. That's totally fine, and you should plant them. But the seed potatoes that I planted this year had no growth on them. I mean, they looked like the potatoes you would get at the grocery store, basically. So nothing, nothing sprouting off them, and that was perfectly fine. There are all kinds of ways that you can, cut your potatoes and divide them up before you plant them. I just planted the whole potato in the grow bag and it's doing wonderfully. So that's my potato experience in grow bags so far, but I will totally keep you updated as we do that process and as we see what the harvest looks like. Another question I had a bunch of times was about the container pond and whether I'm putting a pump in it or how I'm taking care of keeping the water healthy and happy in there. So this year, one of my projects was making a container pond in a half whiskey barrel. It has been so fun. It is so awesome. I have no pump in it. It's not connected to any kind of electricity or anything right now. I will say that the way to keep the water healthy is the plants that you put in your container, because those will help with filtering the water. So you want to have some plants that are like bog plants, so half submerged in the water, you know, and half coming out, like their roots and everything in the water at the water line, and then their leaves and foliage growing above the water. I have a container where I have some, I think it's like little prints, it's papyrus, watercress, and creeping jenny. And so those are growing up above the container, and then their roots are in the water, and they're helping to kind of filter through some of that water. So it's really important to come up with some kind of grouping of plants like that, of bog style plants. And I have them in a pot that's an aquatic pot, so it has lots of room for the water to move through. Like, it's not just a solid pot, it has little spaces along the sides. So bog plants are super important. And then you want to also think about submerged plants, and there's so many resources online. There's so many great articles and lists of these different plants you can use. I have a lily pad, and then I also have hornwort, and hornwort is a really great plant for oxygenating the water. So that plant will actually put oxygen back into the water, which is really good for the health of your container pond, and it also helps if you have fish. So I did add some goldfish recently into the container pond. Those are helping to clean up all the mosquito larvae, which is another consideration. But the hornwort also promotes oxygen for the fish too. But so far, I've been really surprised at how clear the water is in the container pond. It really, really looks good. And yeah, I'm really thinking that it's all because of the plant life that I have growing in the pond. It's really helping. I have another container that's just a bucket of water, basically. It's just a pot with water, and then it has a little fountain in it. That one, it definitely got a lot dirtier. The water, I'm gonna have to keep like just dumping that water and changing it out, which is no big deal because there's nothing in it but the little floating fountain. But just for a reference, it was interesting to see that, yeah, the plants are really making the difference, so that I don't have to have a pump or anything like that, which I am happy about, because I didn't really want to mess with trying to figure out pumps and all that kind of stuff. I'm not ready for that yet, because this is my first container pond, so this is the first one that I'm doing. Let's see here. I just have 2 more questions that I'm going to answer now, but definitely if you have more questions, leave them in the comments, and hopefully maybe I'll do another one of these Q&A videos. I'd love to kind of get to know you guys a little bit better and answer any questions that you have. So the next question was, what's your #1 tip for growing great containers? And that is fertilizing. Of course, you need to have them in the right sun requirements. You need to be able to give them water regularly, because containers need more water. You need to pick, you know, plants that do well in containers, but the most important thing is you need to feed them. Growing in containers is just different than growing in the ground, growing in the landscape. The plants use up those nutrients really quickly in containers, so definitely get on a fertilizing routine. I like to do like a water-soluble fertilizer. That's what has worked best for me in the past, and I would recommend finding one that you like, and yeah, just sticking to a schedule, which can be hard. I actually need to go out and fertilize right now, but it'll make a big difference for your containers for sure. And then the last question was, do I have any future garden plans? And yes, I am always planning. Up here's the other cat. This is Pan Pan. I'm always planning in the garden. So as far as immediate future, I have starting to plan the fall garden. I'm gonna do some collards and calendula, and I wanna do some more kale this year. So planning the fall garden. I will be posting a lot more about that. I definitely want to do some different colorscapes and things for next year. I think it's fun to kind of change up the whole look of the garden. So picking new flowers for next year, but probably all my tried and true veggies, you know, just different varieties, but tried and true veggies for sure. And then as far as long-term future garden, plans. Our family, I have a toddler now, and our family is going to be growing, and so eventually down the road we will probably move from the townhouse, hopefully to a home with a yard. Well, it'll have to have a yard and it'll have to have full sun, because I of course will be gardening. My husband hates mowing and he hates lawn care, so the deal was we can have a big yard, but I have to turn the whole thing into a garden, which is totally fine with me. So that's kind of my future plan, is someday we'll move into a bigger home with a bigger yard and it will all be garden. So hang out, that'll be happening at some point. But yeah, that's just a few questions. And thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for following along. I really appreciate each and every one of you for being here. And it's so much fun to share what I do and to learn and see what you all are doing as well. So I will talk to you in the next video. Have a great day. Bye-bye.